This is a sight that almost all of us are familiar with. Our cities, our centers of commerce and growth, are crumbling under an ever-increasing burden. And as India grows, the need of the hour is to develop new cities and new centers for growth.
Hello and welcome to our special series Building India, where we are looking at infrastructure projects that can transform the country. Today the spotlight is on the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, a corridor of prosperity that will bring with it many new cities and towns and many new aspirations.
It all starts from here. This small hamlet on the outskirts of Delhi is all set for its state with history. For it is from here that the ambitious Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor would start and would run all the way to Mumbai, covering over 1,483 kilometers and passing through 6 states. It is tipped to be the biggest infrastructure project ever and claims to transform the future of the nation. But what is the essence of the project and why is it necessary? That is the first thing we asked when we caught up with Amitabh Kant, the CEO of the DMIC project.
See, it's very important for India to grow at 9 to 10% for a very long period, on a very sustained basis for a period of next 3 decades. And historically, this has been done by Japan post-World War II. It was done by a very small country like Singapore, later by Korea, and recently by China. Now, if you look at all these countries, the logistic costs in these countries is substantially lower than India. In India, it's as high as about 12.5% of your GDP as compared to about 6.5% in Japan. There's a dedicated freight corridor project which links up Delhi to Mumbai, which is a container train which will only carry containers, which is being done by the Indian Railways. It will only carry containers, and this is the first container rail train which will happen in India. And both sides of this, when you do a new container train, it provides an opportunity for you to create new manufacturing cities. It provides an opportunity for you to do new urbanization, and it provides an opportunity for you to move goods far more quicker, far more faster into areas where there is consumption and into your ports for purposes of exports. So what the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor is really doing is using the backbone of the corridor. The corridor is the train. Both sides of this, we are using the influence region to create new smart cities in India.
There is indeed a dire need to develop new cities. Our existing metros are slowly succumbing to the increasing population. And things are only going to get worse from here. According to a study done by consultancy firm McKinsey, the urban population would increase to 590 million.
If you see the state of our towns and cities today, they are bursting at their seams. So as it is, people jokingly remark the development is happening along certain corridors, whether it's the Mumbai-Pune corridor or the Mumbai-Nashik corridor or the Delhi-Jaipur corridor. So because the cities are bursting at their seams, development is tending towards in a linear manner, in a sense, hugging the highways. So we do certainly need to create far new and fresh spaces for mixed use.
And this is why the DMIC project assumes such an importance. According to the master plan, DMIC would create 24 new cities within the Delhi-Mumbai zone, and the first 7 of them are expected to come up by 2018. Kant is confident that these new cities would set a new benchmark in city planning, and none of them would face the same problems that plague our cities right now.
We've tried to do an integrated planning, and we've finished the master plan and the detailed development plan of the first 7 manufacturing cities. And when we do the master planning, we look at the entire hierarchy of roads, we look at the water, we look at the power, we look at how the cities will get connected to the dedicated freight corridors, and how will they get connected to the highways, to the golden quadrilateral, to the airports and ports. And we've looked at the requirement of power, and in fact the Delhi-Mumbai corridor itself is establishing 6 power projects of 1,000 to 1,300 megawatts. It is doing several water recycling projects. It is structuring several projects.
But the cities of future would not come cheap. According to estimates, each of these cities would cost anywhere between 35,000 to 75,000 crore rupees. So who would foot the bill?
Financing of the DMIC projects is certainly going to be one of the key challenges, requiring great deal of innovation, great deal of very carefully and surgically structured division between public responsibilities and private responsibilities, a true form of public-private partnership, so that both public capital and private capital can join hands in the most efficient manner to be able to produce these results.
In fact, that is the model that is being followed for the DMIC project. The total expenditure is expected to be over $100 billion. And the government of India, along with Japan, would contribute around $10 billion. The rest would be contributed by the private sector. An ambitious target, but does the private sector have that kind of money?
All of this is not coming in 1 year. You know, these townships take anywhere from 5 years to 15 years to develop. So when you see, I mean, new cities in India, whether it was Chandigarh or whether it is Noida or others, do take anything from a decade to 2 decades or even longer to develop. So this private capital is not going to be required on day one. It will be required as these projects gather steam and momentum.
But what's there for the private sector? And will it prove to be commercially viable?
There are activities which don't have the ability to generate commercial revenues. Typically urban roads, sewage, solid waste disposal can generate revenues, but certainly not enough to recover the capital cost. Whereas there are other kinds of activities which are obvious, electricity generation, telecom services, power generation, which can easily be water even, which can be more commercially viable. And those are then left to the private sector. But even where you are looking at public funding, financing those assets, which have to be necessarily financed by public funding, it does not mean, and that's an important distinction to make, it does not mean that the provider of those services has to be the public.
Kant is aware of the situation, and perhaps that is why the DMIC has sought around 18,500 crore rupees to build the trunk infrastructure, like drainage, water supply and public transport.
One must realize that there is a very important component of the trunk infrastructure. If you don't have good drainage, if you don't have good sewage, if you don't crack the trunk infrastructure, which is commercially not viable, the other component of the private-public partnership will not happen. So the trunk infrastructure, to our mind, is the key, and that is where the government needs to step in. New cities, over a 30-year period, are very commercially viable. They take a longer period. They take 13 years, 14 years to break even. But once they break even, then they generate a lot of resources. And from that 13th year to the 30th year, they in fact generate so much of resources that you can make many more cities. But the key challenge here is that you should be able to monetize land value. That is the key challenge.
monetizing land value is not the only challenge. In fact, the list of challenges is a rather long one. From land acquisition to financing to governance. When we come back, we'll see at what the road ahead for DMIC looks like.
Braj Binani Group and Bloomberg UTV present Building India. Braj Binani Group and Bloomberg UTV present Building India.
That is how the future cities of a country would look like. If the projections by the DMIC project are anything to go by. It is perhaps the most ambitious project since independence. From building mega industrial zones to building mega cities. The DMIC wants to give the country a complete facelift. But planning is one thing, and translating plans into reality is another. As Pradeep Singh, the Vice Chairman and Managing Director of IDFC project says, master plans are often more violated than being followed.
In the history of our country and its cities, the master plans have been less implemented and more violated, and thereby we have the urban mess that we do. And therefore it would be very useful if the DMIC initiative can also become the prime mover for a new way of making sure that the master plans are enforced.
Following the master plan is just step one. The DMIC still has to overcome the biggest hurdle of land acquisition before it becomes a reality. Land acquisition has often proved to be a major stumbling block. And estimates suggest that projects worth 6,65,000 crores have been stalled due to acquisition problems in the last decade. So how does the DMIC plan to overcome this problem?
We are very hopeful because our project has been structured in a manner where we give equity to the landowners, where we look at not the gross requirement of land but the net requirement of land, so that we are able to create the trunk infrastructure, and the other transaction of land which is owned by the private parties can be done directly by the farmers. But the fact is that areas which have been identified, there's a substantial area of government land available, there's a lot of wasteland available where there's adequate availability of water supply.
But even then, a lot of land still needs to be acquired for the project. And the string of events from Singur to Jaitapur to Noida has exposed the shortcomings of the society. Although the new land acquisition policy is still in the works, by the looks of it, it seems that the government wants to pass on the mantle to the private sector. So is this a step in the right direction?
No, I don't think it can work, because the private guy does not have the power necessarily to enforce the land buyout. The government can, right? The amount of land that you need, if you're going to build a 100 kilometers road, the amount of land that you need on both sides is tremendous. And you can very easily get into a situation where some people decide not to sell. Some people gang up. What will you do? So I don't think land acquisition as an obligation can ever be handled by the private parties on their own.
And then there is the problem of getting the financial structure right. The DMIC project envisages a substantial investment from the private sector. But currently there are no instruments to raise long-term finance, and this can prove to be critical in a project as big as the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor.
It's a clear problem in the making. The amount of money that the government wants in PPP, the 12th five-year plan says that we need $1 trillion of work, 50% on PPP. Right? Now that converts into mind-boggling number of 500 billion. Obviously, you do not have that sort of financing.
A large amount of funding today is from the commercial banking system, and the commercial banking system has what is popularly known as an asset liability mismatch. To counter that, the various stakeholders, whether it's the government, whether it's the private sector, whether it's the financial markets, have all asked for long-term debt funds. As you know, the government is in the final stages of announcing almost a 50,000 crore India debt fund, and the announcements have already been made. So that's the first major step to creating 10 to 20 year money for infrastructure projects.
The sheer size of the DMIC project is a challenge in itself. The project passes through 6 states with different political parties at the helm and different ideologies at work. And getting the cooperation of states is a critical factor for the success of the project. So, what is the situation like?
There is a general desire among states to do infrastructure, to create new cities. There's a general desire amongst politicians, I think now, and there's a clear realization that you're going to win the next election when you deliver in terms of infrastructure. And the states have been very, very receptive. In fact, we've had a very, very positive response from all the 6 states.
And Gujarat perhaps is the best example of this. Its Chief Minister Narendra Modi's insistence on development has borne rich political dividends and has inspired a lot of states to follow suit. When we come back, we'll take a trip to the state and look at one of the biggest cities of the DMIC project coming up.
Braj Binani Group and Bloomberg UTV present Building India. Braj Binani Group and Bloomberg UTV present Building India.
As the first rays of sun break through the dark night, it is time for the sleepy little village of Dholera to wake up. Located 140 kilometers away from Ahmedabad, Dholera is quintessential rural India. But come 2018 and Dholera would look something like this. A change so astounding that it is even difficult to imagine. Where carts would transform into cars and huts would give way to high-rises. Dholera has been earmarked as a special investment region for the DMIC project. This means that Dholera would be developed as a model town with 360 square kilometers wide industrial belt, world-class transport, residential and educational facilities. Not only this, a new airport will be constructed to serve the Dholera special investment region. And almost all of these projects would be developed on a PPP model. The recent turnaround of events is almost like a dream for the 4,500 odd people who live here. Ask Nirmal Singh Chudasama. This 45-year-old has seen the fortunes turn almost overnight. From being at the mercy of rain gods for the daily bread to becoming millionaires.
22 ગામોને જમીનો કે જે જમીનો સરકારી પડતર અને માલિકીની જમીન પણ એટલી બધી ખરાબ કે એની અંદર ક્યારે કોઈ ઉપજ ન આવે. એટલે એવી ખાર લેન્ડ જમીનો હતી. આ જે જાહેરાત થયા પછી એટલી બધી જમીનોની કિંમત વધી છે. એટલે ખેડૂતનો દીકરો જમીન વેચી અને નાના મોટા ધંધા કર્યા.
The going has never been so good for Chudasama and his people. Nowadays, he no longer toils in the fields. He has sold his lands for a hefty sum and has opened a small restaurant along the national highway. Being a former Sarpanch, Chudasma also doubles up as a consultant for other farmers on how to go about making a fortune from their fields. And he hopes that one day Dholera would become a bustling metropolis.
પણ હાલ ગામની વસ્તી માત્ર 2500ની છે. પણ સીએમ સાહેબને એક પ્રશ્ન પૂછવામાં આવ્યો હતો દિલ્હીમાં કે ધોલેરાની વસ્તીમાં એટલે એમને જાહેરમાં એવું નિવેદન કરેલ છે કે 2020માં ધોલેરાની વસ્તી 10 થી 12 લાખની હશે.
In fact, there is a buzz all across Gujarat about the Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor. Almost 40% of the entire stretch of the corridor would pass through the state, and the state government is planning big to cash in on this opportunity.
You will have new ports, you will have new international kind of airports, you will have 6 or 8 lane highways, you will have smart townships, you will have logistic chain, cold storages to cargo handling facilities, you will have maybe the air cargo and maintenance facilities for the airships and kind of things. So this is going to be a tremendous opportunity with a huge multiplier effect.
Gujarat is all set to speed away on the highway to success. And there is no doubt that the DMIC project would prove to be a big game changer for the states through which it passes. But it's just the first step. Over the next 2 decades, more than 350 million people are expected to move in from the villages to cities. And projects like DMIC need to be replicated on a much larger scale to cater to the growing demands of employment and housing. So what can be a good starting point for the next league?
After the Mumbai-Delhi dedicated freight corridor, the next alignment is already publicly announced and this work has already moved ahead. It's called the Eastern Corridor from Ludhiana to Calcutta. But other tracks do exist. For example, Chennai-Bangalore is a logical track. Mumbai-Nashik is a logical track. Indore-Bhopal is a logical track. Calcutta-Durgapur-Asansol is a logical track. So there are many such corridor concepts that are waiting to happen in the country.
Indeed, the future is full of infinite possibilities. And it is important that we capitalize on these opportunities. The DMIC is a good beginning, but a lot still needs to be done on every front. From developing new industrial hubs to regenerating our existing cities. And it is the time to start building for India for the future.
As India grows, the Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor will be a corridor of opportunity and it will help transform lives and the country that it serves. Thank you so much for joining us. Goodbye.